In a Baltimore bank, a young black woman stands humiliated. Her grandfather's legacy, a veteran's funeral benefit check, shredded without a second thought. The branch manager, dripping with contempt, mocks her. A phone call won't save. Your fake check. Suspicion, prejudice, and cold indifference strip her of dignity. She endures dismissive glares, baseless accusations, and the sting of being judged by her youth and race. But as the crowd whispers and phones record, federal agents storm in, their badges gleaming with authority. Will justice prevail for a woman, wronged by a system meant to protect? Stick around to uncover the truth. Where does her fight lead? If you believe in standing up to injustice, hit that subscribe button for our latest stories and share where you're listening from. What secrets will unravel? Stay tuned to find out. The late summer air in Baltimore clung to Clara Hernandez like a heavy shroud, thick with the scent of asphalt and distant harbor salt. At 28, she moved through the city with a quiet strength, her dark eyes carrying the weight of recent loss. Her grandfather, Colonel Charles Hernandez, a decorated veteran whose life had spanned 3 wars, had passed just 2 weeks ago. His absence left a void in Clara's heart, but his final wish, a funeral benefit check from the Department of Veterans Affairs, VA, the federal agency supporting veterans and their families, burned brightly in her hands. This money, legally bequeathed to her, was meant to honor his memory with a proper farewell. Clara, a social worker accustomed to navigating bureaucracy for others, felt the weight of this task as both duty and devotion. Inside her modest apartment, Clara sat at a worn kitchen table, the check spread before her alongside a neat stack of documents, her grandfather's will, the death certificate, and her identification. The VA check, crisp and official, bore her name as the rightful beneficiary. She traced the embossed seal with her fingertip, imagining the stories her grandfather had told, tales of courage, sacrifice, and a nation he'd served with unwavering pride. "This is for you, abuelo," she whispered, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. She tucked the papers into a folder, determination settling over her like armor. Today she would take the check to Unity Trust Bank, a towering glass building that promised security, but felt cold and impersonal. The bank's lobby buzzed with the midday crowd, businessmen tapping their feet, mothers hushing restless children, and tellers exchanging clipped pleasantries. Clara approached a counter where a young teller, his name tag reading Ethan, glanced up with a practiced smile. She slid the check and documents across the marble surface, her voice clear and composed. "I'm here to deposit this VA funeral benefit check. I'm the named beneficiary, and I have all the required paperwork." Ethan's smile faltered as he scanned the check, his brow furrowing. He tapped at his keyboard, then hesitated, his eyes darting toward the back of the lobby. "Hold on a moment," Ethan muttered, rising from his seat. Clara's fingers tightened around her folder, a flicker of unease stirring in her gut. She watched as Ethan disappeared into an office, only to return moments later with a woman whose presence seemed to chill the air. Sheila Gonzalez, the branch manager, was 35, with sharp features and a gaze that sliced through the room. Her reputation for rigid adherence to protocol and a rumored disdain for certain clients preceded her. Sheila's lips pressed into a thin line as she reviewed the check, her manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm. "This doesn't look right," Sheila declared, her tone flat but laced with suspicion. Clara straightened, meeting the manager's stare. "It's a valid check from the Department of Veterans Affairs, issued for my grandfather's funeral expenses. I have the will, his death certificate, and my ID to prove I'm the beneficiary." She opened her folder, presenting the documents with calm precision. Sheila barely glanced at them, her eyes narrowing as she held the check to the light, as if searching for a flaw to justify her doubt. "The routing numbers seem off," Sheila said, her voice dripping with authority, "and the paper stock isn't standard. We can't process this. It's likely fraudulent." Clara's breath caught, her composure wavering. "Fraudulent? This is my grandfather's legacy, a man who served this country for decades, I've brought every document you could need. She pushed the papers closer, but Sheila waved them away, her expression hardening. I don't need to see more, Sheila snapped. Our policy is clear. Suspicious instruments are destroyed to protect the bank. Before Clara could protest, Sheila nodded to Ethan, who fed the check into a shredder beside the counter. The machine whirred to life, its mechanical growl swallowing the paper in seconds. Clara froze, the sound echoing in her ears like a gunshot. The check, her grandfather's final gift, his dignity in death, was gone, reduced to confetti in a plastic bin. Around her, the lobby seemed to pause. Customers whispered, their eyes darting between Clara and Sheila. A woman in line shook her head, muttering under her breath, while a man pulled out his phone, discreetly recording. Clara's hands trembled, not with fear, but with a rising tide of anger. You just destroyed something that wasn't yours to touch, she said, her voice low but fierce. That was my grandfather's wish, his honor. Do you even understand what you've done? Sheila shrugged, unfazed. Policy is policy. If you disagree, file a complaint with corporate. Her words were a dismissal, sharp and final. Clara's vision blurred with unshed tears, not of defeat but of outrage. She gathered her documents, her movements deliberate, and stepped back from the counter. The weight of the injustice pressed against her chest, but she refused to let it crush her. Outside, the Baltimore sun beat down, its heat a stark contrast to the coldness she'd just faced. Clara sank onto a bench, her folder clutched tightly. The city pulsed around her, horns blaring, pedestrians rushing. But she felt anchored to that moment of loss. Her mind replayed her grandfather's voice, steady and commanding. Don't ever let anyone dim your light, Clara. She reached into her purse, her fingers brushing against a creased business card. It belonged to General Earl McKinley, her grandfather's old friend, given to her at the funeral with a promise. Call if you need me. Clara stared at the card, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just fighting for a check, she was fighting for her grandfather's legacy, for the respect he deserved. Her thumb hovered over her phone, then pressed dial. The line rang once before a warm, authoritative voice answered. Clara, what's wrong? She took a deep breath, her voice steady with purpose. General McKinley, I need your help. The bank just destroyed my grandfather's VA check, and I'm not letting this go. The Baltimore afternoon buzzed with the rhythm of a city in motion. But Clara Hernandez sat motionless on the bench outside Unity Trust Bank, her phone pressed to her ear. The sting of the shredded VA check lingered, a wound to her pride and her grandfather's legacy. General Earl McKinley's voice, warm yet edged with steel, crackled through the line. Clara, tell me exactly what happened, he urged. She steadied her breath, her words spilling out with a mix of fury and precision. Sheila's cold suspicion, the refusal to verify her documents, the shredder's merciless whir. They didn't just destroy a check, Clara said, her voice trembling but resolute. They disrespected my abuelo, a man who gave everything for this country. McKinley's silence was heavy, broken only by the sharp intake of his breath. Destroying a VA check without verification isn't just negligence, he said, his tone low and fierce. It's a federal violation. Clara, where are you right now? She glanced at the bank's glass facade, its polished surface mocking. I'm still outside, I couldn't walk away. McKinley's response was immediate. Stay there. I'm making calls. This ends today. Clara lowered the phone, her heart pounding. Doubt crept in. Could one call challenge a system that had dismissed her so easily? As a social worker, she'd seen too many clients crushed by bureaucracy, their voices silenced by those with power. Yet her grandfather's lessons echoed in her mind. Strength isn't in the fight you win, Clara. It's in the one you refuse to lose. She opened her purse, pulling out a small notebook her abuelo had given her, filled with his handwritten quotes. One caught her eye. Never let fear outrun your purpose. She traced the words, her resolve hardening. Back in her apartment that evening, Clara sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by boxes of her grandfather's belongings. She sifted through faded letters, medals, and a worn VA handbook, searching for answers. The Department of Veterans. Affairs, she knew, was meant to support veterans and their families, but its processes were a labyrinth. She found a section on benefit checks, confirming what she suspected. Banks were required to verify VA instruments through federal protocols, not destroy them on a whim. Sheila's actions weren't just cruel, they were illegal. Clara's fingers tightened around the handbook, her mind racing. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the dignity her grandfather had earned. Across town, General McKinley worked with the efficiency of a man who'd commanded battlefields. From his office in Washington, D.C., he dialed contacts at the office of the Comptroller of the Currency and the Treasury's Office of Inspector General. "We've got a bank in Baltimore violating federal regulations," he told a colleague, his voice clipped. A VA check was destroyed without cause, and the beneficiary, a veteran's granddaughter, was humiliated. "I want agents on the ground by day's end." His colleague, Special Agent Angela Ruiz, listened intently, already pulling files on Unity Trust. "Earl, if this checks out, that branch is in deep trouble," she said. McKinley's jaw tightened. "It checks out. The victim's name is Clara Hernandez. She's not backing down." As dusk settled over Baltimore, Clara stood at her apartment window, watching the city's lights flicker to life. Her phone buzzed with a text from McKinley. "Investigation launched. Agents are arriving soon. Stay strong." She exhaled, a mix of relief and anticipation washing over her. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since the shredder's roar, she felt a spark of hope. She turned back to her grandfather's belongings, pulling out a photo of him in uniform, his eyes fierce yet kind. "I'm doing this for you," she murmured, her voice soft but unwavering. Meanwhile, at Unity Trust Bank, the lobby had quieted as the day drew to a close. Sheila Gonzalez sat in her office, reviewing transaction logs with a smug satisfaction. She believed her actions were justified. Protecting the bank from suspicious clients was her duty, or so she told herself. But as she locked her desk, a shadow crossed the parking lot. Two black SUVs pulled up, their doors opening to reveal figures in crisp suits, badges glinting under the streetlights. Special Agent Angela Ruiz led the team, her expression unreadable, but resolute. She stepped into the bank, her voice cutting through the silence. "We need to speak with the manager, now." Clara, unaware of the agent's arrival, sat back at her kitchen table, the VA handbook open before her. She jotted notes, her pen moving with purpose. She wasn't a lawyer or a soldier, but she was her grandfather's granddaughter, resilient, resourceful, and unwilling to be silenced. The weight of the day pressed against her, but she refused to let it break her. As she closed the handbook, her phone buzzed again. McKinley's voice was calm but firm. "Clara, the wheels are turning. Agents are at the bank. This is just the beginning." She nodded, though he couldn't see her, her eyes fixed on her grandfather's photo. "Thank you, General," she said. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." The Unity Trust Bank lobby in Baltimore thrummed with tension as Clara Hernandez stepped through its glass doors once more, summoned by a curt call from General McKinley. Dawn had barely broken, casting a pale glow over the city, but the weight of yesterday's injustice clung to her like damp fog. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with a fire kindled by her grandfather's memory. She wore a simple blazer, her folder of documents tucked under her arm, a shield against the disdain she'd faced. The bank, usually a hive of routine, felt like a battlefield now, its polished floors reflecting the stern faces of federal agents who had arrived at dusk. Special Agent Angela Ruiz stood at the center of the lobby, her dark suit a stark contrast to the teller's nervous glances. Her team, badges gleaming, moved with quiet precision, securing records and cordoning off Sheila Gonzalez's office. Clara's pulse quickened as she spotted Sheila behind the counter, her usual arrogance replaced by a flicker of unease. The CEO, manager's eyes locked onto Clara, narrowing with a venom that made her stomach twist. But Clara, bolstered by McKinley's assurance that justice was in motion, squared her shoulders and approached Agent Ruiz. Ms. Hernandez, Ruiz said, her voice calm but commanding. We need your statement to corroborate the complaint. Are you ready? Clara nodded, her resolve as unyielding as her grandfather's had been in combat. I'm here to set this right, she replied, her tone steady. Ruiz gestured toward a conference room, but before they could move, Sheila strode forward, her heels clicking like gunfire on the marble floor. This is absurd, Sheila snapped, her voice slicing through the murmurs of onlookers. You think you can walk in here with a fake check and fool us, then cry victim when we follow protocol? Her words dripped with scorn, each syllable a calculated jab at Clara's dignity. People like you always think you're entitled to special treatment. The lobby fell silent, customers clutching their bags, some pulling out phones to capture the scene. Clara's cheeks burned, the sting of Sheila's racism cutting deeper than any shredder. Yet she stood taller, her gaze unwavering. You didn't follow protocol, Clara said, her voice ringing clear despite the tremor in her hands. You destroyed a VA check, my grandfather's legacy, without verification. You didn't just break the law, you insulted a man who served this country. Her words carried the weight of her abuelo's honor, and a ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. A woman in line muttered, "That's not right," while a man nodded, his camera still rolling. Sheila's smirk faltered, but she doubled, down, leaning closer. Don't lecture me, girl. You don't understand how banks work. Before Clara could respond, the lobby doors swung open with a rush of authority. 2 more agents entered, their presence amplifying the tension. Agent Ruiz raised a hand, her expression unyielding. Ms. Gonzalez, step back. You're addressing the complainant in a federal investigation. Sheila froze, her bravado crumbling. As Ruiz turned to her team, secure the transaction logs and verification records. We're auditing every step this branch took with Ms. Hernandez's check. Clara's breath caught as she watched the agents move, their efficiency a stark contrast to Sheila's reckless dismissal. Ruiz led her to the conference room where a laptop displayed banking regulations. Tell us everything, Ruiz said, her pen poised. Clara recounted the previous day, the suspicious glares, Sheila's refusal to examine her documents, the shredder's roar that erased her grandfather's. Final wish. Her voice grew stronger with each detail, fueled by the memory of her abuelo's teachings. Speak truth, Clara, even when they don't want to hear it. Outside, the lobby buzzed with whispers. Customers lingered, drawn to the unfolding drama, their phones capturing snippets for social media. Ethan, the young teller, hovered near the counter, his face pale as he overheard agents discussing federal violations. Sheila, now cornered in her office, tried to explain herself to Agent Marcus, a towering figure from the Treasury's. Inspector General, I was protecting the bank, she insisted, her voice shrill. Marcus's response was icy. You bypassed mandatory verification and humiliated a veteran's kin. That's not protection. It's prejudice. Clara emerged from the conference room, her statement complete, and caught Sheila's glare through the office window. The manager's defiance was fading, replaced by a dawning realization of consequences. Clara felt a surge of strength, not just for herself, but for every person Sheila had dismissed. She stepped into the lobby where a customer, an older man with a Vietnam veteran cap, approached her. You did good standing up to her, he said, his voice gruff but kind. Clara smiled, her heart lifting as others nodded in solidarity. She prepared to leave. Ruiz pulled her aside. We've got enough to suspend Gonzalez pending a full audit, she said. Your courage made this possible. Clara's eyes glistened, but she held back tears. It's for my grandfather, she said softly. He'd want me to fight. Ruiz nodded, a rare warmth in her gaze. You're fighting for more than him now. Clara stepped outside, the morning air sharp against her skin. The city pulsed around her, oblivious to the battle within the bank's walls. She clutched her folder, her grandfather's words echoing. Strength is in the fight you refuse to lose. The crowd's support, the agent's resolve, and her voice had shifted something seismic. She wasn't just a grieving granddaughter anymore. She was a force, and this was only the beginning. The Baltimore skyline shimmered under a late-morning haze, but inside a community center on the city's east side, Clara Hernandez stood at the edge of a new battleground. The federal investigation into Unity Trust Bank had gained momentum, its ripples stirring the air around her. Clara, her dark hair pulled back tightly, felt the weight of eyes, hopeful, skeptical, and curious, fixed on her as she prepared to address a gathering of veterans and their families. Her grandfather's memory fueled her, his voice a steady drumbeat. Truth cuts deeper than any blade. She clutched a small stack of notes, her resolve sharpened by the revelations unfolding behind the bank's glass walls. Special Agent Angela Ruiz and her team had spent days dissecting Unity Trust's records, unearthing a pattern of negligence that extended beyond Clara's case. In a sterile office, Ruiz pored over transaction logs, her jaw tightening as she uncovered evidence of Sheila Gonzalez's systemic shortcuts. The manager had routinely skipped verification for clients she deemed untrustworthy, often young, non-white or reliant on government funds, favoring efficiency over fairness. But the dam broke when Ethan, the young teller, cracked under the weight of his conscience. In a hushed meeting with Ruiz, he confessed, "Sheila pushed us to flag certain accounts without checking. She said it kept our numbers clean." His words, recorded and time-stamped, were a grenade lobbed into the bank's defenses. Clara, unaware of Ethan's betrayal, stood before the community center's worn podium, her heart pounding. The room smelled of coffee and old wood, its walls lined with photos of veterans, including her abuelo. A grizzled man in a Marine Corps cap introduced her, his voice rough with pride. "This young woman's fighting for us all," he said. Clara took a breath, her voice clear despite the knot in her throat. "My grandfather, Colonel Charles Hernandez, left me a VA check to honor his life. Unity Trust destroyed it without a second thought. But I'm here because this isn't just my story, it's yours too." Murmurs of agreement rose as attendees shared their tales of dismissive tellers and lost benefits. Outside, Unity Trust's regional executives scrambled to contain the fallout. In a sleek boardroom, they drafted statements blaming isolated errors while distancing themselves from Sheila's actions. But the public's outrage, fueled by videos from the bank's lobby, spread across Baltimore's social media. Clara's name trended alongside hashtags like "Justice for Veterans," amplifying her cause. She felt the pressure, both empowering and daunting, as she left the meeting, her phone buzzing with messages of support, and a few accusing her of exploiting her grandfather's legacy for attention. Back at the bank, Ruiz's team dug deeper, uncovering falsified reports Sheila had submitted to inflate her branch's performance metrics. One document, buried in a digital archive, showed she'd overridden verification protocols dozens of times, each instance targeting clients like, Clara. Ruiz's eyes narrowed as she cross-referenced the data. "This isn't incompetence," she told Agent Marcus. "It's deliberate." Marcus nodded, his voice grim. "She's facing more than suspension now. Try criminal charges." The agent's findings sent shockwaves up the bank's chain of command, forcing executives to reconsider their damage control strategy. Clara, meanwhile, sat in a diner across from the community center, sipping lukewarm tea as she processed the meeting's impact. A woman from the crowd, a veteran's widow named Marla, joined her, sharing a story of being denied a VA loan by another bank. "You're giving us a voice," Marla said, her eyes fierce. Clara's chest tightened, the responsibility settling heavily. She wasn't just fighting for her abuelo anymore. She was a beacon for others, a role she hadn't sought but couldn't refuse. That evening, her phone rang, McKinley's name lighting up the screen. His voice was steady, a lifeline in the eye. "Storm. Clara, the replacement check is in your account, no fees. Unity Trust is covering damages, but the investigation's far from over. Sheila's actions weren't isolated, they're part of a pattern." Clara's breath hitched, relief mingling with determination. "Thank you, General," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But I can't stop here. Too many others are hurting. McKinley chuckled, a rare warmth in his tone. Your grandfather would be proud. Keep pushing. Clara hung up, staring out her apartment window at the city's flickering lights. The diner conversation replayed in her mind, Marla's words echoing her abuelo's. Never let them silence you. She opened her notebook, jotting down names from the meeting, people whose stories deserved to be heard. The bank's walls were cracking, Sheila's secrets spilling out. But Clara knew the fight was bigger than one branch. She was no longer just a granddaughter seeking justice. She was a catalyst, and the truth was her weapon. The Baltimore skyline glowed under a twilight haze, its lights a mosaic of hope and struggle, as Clara Hernandez stepped into the bright studio of a local news station. The air buzzed with the hum of cameras and the sharp scent of studio polish, a far cry from the community center where she'd first shared her story. Her heart thrummed with a mix of nerves and resolve. Her grandfather's words a steady anchor. Speak, Clara, and the world will listen. At 28, she was no longer just a social worker or a grieving granddaughter. She was a voice amplified by a city's outrage and a viral hashtag, "In Your Justice for Veterans," that had thrust her into the spotlight. Clara adjusted her blazer, her notes tucked away, trusting her truth to guide her. The anchor, a woman with a warm smile but probing eyes, welcomed her to a sleek set. You've sparked a movement, she began, her tone inviting yet sharp. Tell us why. Clara took a breath, her voice steady despite the glare of lights. My grandfather, a colonel who served 3 wars, left me a VA check to honor his life. Unity Trust Bank shredded it, no questions asked, because of suspicion rooted in prejudice. I'm here for him, and for every family dismissed by a system that should protect them. Her words flowed, raw and unscripted, each syllable carrying her abuelo's legacy. The anchor leaned in, captivated, as Clara described the bank's cold dismissal and the federal agent's swift response. Across the city, screens flickered with her face, her story resonating in living rooms and barbershops. Viewers tweeted their messages, a tide of support. She's speaking for all of us, one wrote. But not all voices were kind. Online, detractors labeled Clara an opportunist, accusing her of sensationalizing a minor error for fame. The criticism stung, each barb a reminder of the vulnerability her newfound visibility brought. Yet she pressed on, her resolve forged in the memory of her grandfather's unyielding courage. At Unity Trust's headquarters, executives huddled in a glass-walled office, their faces taut as a PR firm crafted a deflection. Sheila Gonzalez's actions were an isolated lapse, they claimed, not reflective of the bank's values. The statement, polished and hollow, aimed to quell the growing scandal. But Clara's interview was unraveling their narrative. Her authenticity, her quiet fury, her love for her abuelo, cut through their spin like a blade. Social media erupted, demanding accountability, while veterans groups rallied behind her, their emails flooding her inbox with stories of similar injustices. Clara left the studio, the night air cool against her skin, and headed to a community center where she'd organized a meeting for affected families. The room, packed with veterans, widows, and allies, hummed with anticipation. She stood at the front, no podium this time, just a microphone and her truth. I'm not here for applause, she said, her gaze sweeping the crowd. I'm here because banks like Unity Trust have failed you too. Let's share our stories and demand change. One by one, attendees spoke. A Navy widow denied a pension deposit. A young veteran flagged for suspicious VA funds. Clara listened, her notebook filling with names and pain, her purpose crystallizing. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs. But the backlash intensified. That evening, Sheila Gonzalez, desperate to salvage her reputation, appeared on a 8 rival news channel. Her voice dripped with calculated remorse. I followed protocol to protect the bank, she lied, then turned the knife. Ms. Hernandez is twisting a simple mistake into a crusade for attention. Clara, watching the broadcast in her apartment, felt anger surge through her veins. Sheila's words were a distortion, a betrayal of the truth she'd fought to expose. She slammed her laptop shut, her grandfather's photo on the table grounding her. "You don't get to rewrite this," she whispered, her resolve hardening. Instead of firing back online, Clara channeled her fury into action. She contacted a veterans advocacy group, offering to collaborate on a campaign to reform bank policies. The group's leader, a former Marine named Carla, embraced her vision. "You're building a movement," Carla said, her voice thick with admiration. Together they planned a series of forums to amplify victims' voices, with Clara as the linchpin. She spent hours drafting flyers, her pen moving with the same precision her abuelo had taught her in chess. Every move deliberate, every strategy bold. As midnight approached, Clara sat at her kitchen table, the city's hum a distant lullaby. Her phone buzzed with a message from General McKinley. "Your interview shook the city. Keep speaking, you're unstoppable." She smiled, exhaustion mingling with pride. The community meeting had ignited something, a collective strength, a chorus, of voices refusing to be silenced. She opened her notebook, rereading the stories she'd collected. Each one was a thread in a tapestry of resilience, woven with her grandfather's spirit. Clara leaned back, her eyes drifting to the stars beyond. Her window. Sheila's lies, the online vitriol, the bank's deflections. They were obstacles, but not barriers. She was no longer just fighting for a check or her abuelo's honor. She was fighting for a system that valued every veteran's sacrifice. Her voice, once a solitary cry, was now a beacon, and the world was listening. As she closed her notebook, a single thought anchored her. This was only the beginning, and she would not be silenced. The Baltimore air carried a crisp edge as Clara Hernandez stepped into a federal hearing room, its stark walls and polished tables a far cry from the community centers where her voice had first gained strength. The investigation into Unity Trust Bank had reached its zenith, and Clara, now a symbol of resilience, stood ready to testify before a panel on veterans' rights. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with the weight of her grandfather's legacy. His words a quiet fire within her. "Justice isn't given, Clara, it's claimed." At 28, she was no longer just a granddaughter. She was a force, her campaign for reform, a beacon for those silenced by indifference. The hearing room buzzed with anticipation, reporters scribbling notes while veterans and advocates filled the seats. Clara adjusted her scarf, her eyes scanning. The panel, senators and VA officials whose stern faces softened as she approached the microphone. Her testimony, prepared with the precision her abuelo had instilled, was a weapon of truth. "Unity Trust Bank didn't just destroy my grandfather's VA check," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "They dismissed countless families, targeting those who looked like me. Young, non-white, reliant on benefits. This isn't one mistake, it's a system that fails those it should protect." She recounted stories from her forums. A widow's lost pension, a veteran's flagged account. Each word a plea for change. Across town, Unity Trust's executives squirmed in their boardroom, their attempts at a quiet settlement crumbling. Under public pressure. Clara's campaign, amplified by social media and veterans groups, had forced their hand. They'd offered hush money, a tactic she'd rejected with a fierceness that echoed her grandfather's defiance. Now, facing a federal probe, they scrambled to salvage their reputation. Their PR team's polished lies no match for the raw power of her truth. The hearing, live-streamed to thousands, was their reckoning. Special Agent Angela Ruiz sat in the gallery, her notepad filled with evidence that sealed Sheila Gonzalez's fate. The former manager, stripped of her title, faced criminal charges for falsifying reports and violating federal banking laws. Ruiz's investigation had exposed Sheila's pattern of bypassing protocols, each infraction a thread in a tapestry of prejudice. In a sterile office, Sheila's lawyer advised a plea deal, but her defiance had withered, replaced by the grim reality of consequences. Clara's testimony, Ruiz knew, was the linchpin that turned whispers of injustice into a roar for reform. As Clara spoke, her voice grew bolder, her words painting a vision of accountability. Mandatory training for bank staff, transparent verification, processes and penalties for systemic bias. The panel leaned forward, one senator scribbling furiously, another nodding with rare emotion. A veteran in the audience, his cap emblazoned with Vietnam '68, wiped a tear, his quiet applause, sparking a wave through the room. Clara's chest tightened, not with pride but with purpose. She was speaking for them, for her abuelo, for every story she'd carried. The hearing's climax came when a senator asked, "What do you want, Ms. Hernandez?" Clara paused, her gaze steady. "I want banks to honor veterans' sacrifices, not shred their dignity. I want a system where no one is judged by their skin or their ethnicity." The room erupted in applause, the sound a thunderclap of validation. Hours later, Unity Trust announced a $2 million fund for affected families, with Clara named to its advisory board. A victory, but not the end. That evening, Clara stood in her apartment, a small altar adorned with her grandfather's photo and medals. She lit a candle, its flame dancing as she whispered, "We did it, abuelo." Her phone buzzed with a call from General McKinley, his voice rich with pride. "Clara, your testimony changed the game. Sheila's done, fired, fined, and facing jail. The fund is just the start. You're your grandfather's daughter." She smiled, tears brimming but unshed. "I'm his granddaughter," she corrected gently, "and I'm not done fighting." The next day, Clara organized a vigil outside Unity Trust, joined by dozens from her forums. They held candles, their stories shared in hushed tones, a testament to resilience. A letter from McKinley arrived, its words a balm. "You've honored Charles in ways he'd never imagined." Clara tucked it beside her grandfather's photo, her heart full yet restless. The bank's fund was a step, but systemic change loomed larger, a mountain she was ready to climb. As night fell, Clara walked Baltimore's streets, the city's pulse a reminder of the battles ahead. Sheila's fall, the fund, her advisory role. They were milestones, not endpoints. Her grandfather's spirit, fierce and unyielding, urged her forward. She wasn't just a voice now. She was a movement, and the world would feel its weight. The Baltimore waterfront shimmered under a November dusk, its amber glow casting long shadows across a memorial plaza where Clara Hernandez stood poised to speak. 6 months had passed since her battle with Unity Trust Bank reshaped her life, transforming her from a grieving granddaughter into a national advocate for veterans' rights. At 28, Clara carried her grandfather's legacy like a torch, its light undimmed by the challenges that followed. Tonight, at a veterans tribute event, her voice would echo his wisdom. "You don't need a uniform to fight. Just refuse to bow to injustice." The plaza buzzed with hundreds, veterans in faded caps, families clutching photos, and activists inspired by Clara's campaign. She adjusted her coat, the chill biting her skin, but her heart burned with purpose. Her journey, marked by a shredded VA check, a federal investigation, and a hard-won fund for wronged families, had ignited a movement. Yet new battles loomed. Conservative critics, bristling at her rising profile, labeled her a political agitator, accusing her of exploiting veterans' struggles. Their barbs stung, sowing doubt as she questioned her strength to lead. Clara stepped to the podium, the crowd's murmurs fading to a reverent hush. A banner behind her read, "Honor Through Justice," its letters bold against the twilight. She gripped the microphone, her eyes sweeping the sea of faces. "My grandfather, Colonel Charles Hernandez, taught me that courage isn't in the battles you win, but in the ones you refuse to lose," she began, her voice steady yet rich with emotion. "When a bank destroyed his final wish, I fought, not just for him, but for every family denied dignity. Tonight, we honor those who served by demanding a system that serves them back." Her words, raw and resonant, sparked applause, a tide of affirmation washing over her. Among the crowd, a young veteran named Javier watched, his hands trembling as he clutched a VA letter. Clara's forums had emboldened him to challenge a bank that froze his benefits, a victory she'd helped secure. After her speech, he approached, his voice thick. "You made me believe I could fight," he said. Others joined, widows, sons, daughters, so each thanking Clara for giving them courage. Their gratitude anchored her, silencing the inner whispers of doubt. She wasn't just leading a cause, she was forging a community, her abuelo's spirit woven into every story. But the spotlight brought scrutiny. Online, detractors flooded forums claiming Clara's advocacy politicized veterans' issues, their attacks laced with veiled racism. At home, she scrolled through comments, her jaw tight. "They don't see the families I'm fighting for," she muttered, her grandfather's photo a steadying presence on her table. His eyes, fierce yet kind, reminded her of his words. "The loudest critics are often the most afraid." She closed her laptop, resolve flaring. She'd face the noise, but she wouldn't let it drown her. Clara's work with national veterans organizations had grown, her role on the Unity Trust Fund's advisory board, amplifying her influence. She pushed for policies, staff retraining, bias audits, that ensured banks respected VA benefits. Her days blurred with meetings and strategy sessions, each step a testament to her grandfather's belief in perseverance. Yet late at night, alone in her apartment, she wrestled with exhaustion, wondering if she could sustain the fight. A letter from General McKinley, tucked in her notebook, steadied her. "You've changed lives, Clara. Don't stop." As her speech ended, the crowd's ovation swelled, veterans raising fists in solidarity. Clara stepped down, her breath visible in the cold, and joined a circle of young activists. They shared plans for new forums, their energy a spark that reignited her own. She smiled, realizing her abuelo's legacy wasn't just in her, it lived in those she'd inspired. The plaza glowed with candlelight, each flame a story of resilience, and Clara felt part of something vast, unbreakable. Later, she visited her grandfather's grave, the cemetery quiet under a starlit sky. Kneeling, she placed a bouquet of marigolds, their golden petals vivid against the stone. "I did it, abuelo," she whispered, her voice soft but fierce. "Your fight's alive in me, in all of us." Rising, she walked away, the city's a promise of battles to come. A final image lingered, Clara silhouetted against the horizon, striding forward, unbowed. Words appeared on an imagined screen. "For those who never yield." Her story wasn't over. The critics, the systems, the struggles, they'd persist. But Clara, forged in her grandfather's fire, was ready. She was no longer just a voice. She was a legacy, and the world would know her strength. What a journey Clara Hernandez has taken us on, a fight for justice that echoes far beyond a single bank. Her courage reminds us that one voice, rooted, truth can shake systems and spark change. We'd love to hear your thoughts. How did Clara's story move you? Have you faced similar battles, or do you know someone who has? Drop a comment, share your reflections, or tag us with Kunoki Justice for Veterans to keep this conversation alive. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for joining us in Baltimore's streets, feeling every triumph and tear. Your support fuels these stories of resilience. Subscribe to catch our next tale of everyday heroes refusing to bow. Until then, keep standing tall, and we'll see you soon with more stories that demand to be heard. Stay inspired.